Call this meeting to order. Thank you all for being here. You are at the Stanislaus LAFCO, or Local Agent Formation Commission. If everyone would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, let's go through our introductions of commissioners and staff.
Yeah, Bill Berryhill, public member.
Amy Bublak, city member.
Terry Withrow, county member.
Mike Van Winkle, alternate city member.
Brad Hahn, alternate public member.
Javier Camarena, assistant executive officer with LAFCO.
Sarah Lytle-Penny, executive officer.
Rob Terrell, LAFCO counsel.
Jennifer Goss, commission clerk.
Very good, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to public comment. This is a time for anyone in the public that would like to speak about any item that is not on the agenda. Everything on the agenda will have a chance, opportunity for public comments, but this would be anything that didn't make the agenda tonight. Do we have any public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to approval of minutes from March 28, 2018. Has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes? And if so, we get a motion?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion. Do we have
Second.
a second? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Very good. Thank you. Correspondence.
So tonight you have a packet of specific correspondence. They're all in relation to item 7A. It includes an email from Kurt and Sharon Hertlin, an email from Wendy McClendon, and then a letter we received today from Evelyn Halbert.
Very good. That's it. Great. Okay. Any before we move forward, any declarations of conflicts, disqualifications for tonight's meeting from any of the members? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent items. Do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Let's move on to public hearing. Item 7A.
Good evening, Javier Camarena with LAFCO. The item being discussed this evening is LAFCO application number 2017-03 and sphere of influence modification number 2017-07, the Division 1 North Area change of organization to the Oakdale Rural Fire Protection District. The proposed project is a request to expand the sphere of influence and annex approximately 57,595 acres into the Oakdale Rural Fire Protection District. The area is located in the northernmost area of Stanislaus County and is adjacent to San Joaquin and Calaveras counties. The area is also known as the Division 1 North Area. The district was formed in 1945 and provides fire suppression and emergency medical response services. Those services are currently contracted with Stanislaus Consolidated. The Division 1 North Area is the only area of the county that is not within boundaries of a local fire protection district, and historically the Oakdale Rural Fire Protection District has provided service for the area, or has responded to calls in the area. The area is also within a state responsibility area where CAL FIRE responds to non-structure and wildland fires during the fire season. Annexation of the proposed area has long been a goal of the district. One of the reasons it's been a goal is so that the district can apply its special tax to areas consistent with its service area. The district proposed a similar annexation in 1997 with the same area. However, that annexation request was denied by the commission. The district has reported that it responds to over 100 calls per year in the proposed annexation area, and no operational funds are received from property owners within that area. The district has also mentioned that property owners within the district are currently subsidizing services for the Division 1 North area. Annexation would include an extension of the district's special tax in the area combined with a tax sharing agreement with the county, resulting in an estimated $40,000 per year for the district for services. The proposed application includes a sphere of influence modification concurrently with the proposal. Government code requires that a municipal service review be completed either prior to or concurrent with the sphere of influence modification. A service review was adopted for all fire districts in July of 2016. That review is up to date and contemplated a future request by the district to expand its sphere and boundary. Also, when updating a sphere of influence, government code requires that specific determinations be made. The determinations provide information on planned uses, need and adequacy of public facilities and services, communities of interest, and information on disadvantaged unincorporated communities. Further discussion on these items can be found in the staff report. Also required, the Commission must consider several factors when evaluating an annexation. Some of the factors evaluated include population, growth, local plans and policies, impacts to agriculture and services. A discussion on these factors can be found also in the staff report. Should the Commission approve the proposal, the annexation will be subject to protest proceedings. The protest proceedings provide registered voters and property owners the opportunity to protest the Commission's decision. So a little bit more about the protest hearing and proceedings. Pursuant to government code, if protests are filed by less than 25% of the registered voters or landowners in the affected area, the Commission's decision will be confirmed. If protests are filed by 25 to 50% of the registered voters, the decision will go to an election. If protests are filed by 25% or more of the landowners in the area who own at least 25% of the assessed value of land within the territory, the decision will also go to an election. If protests are filed by at least 50% of the registered voters within the territory, the proceedings will automatically be terminated. Further details on protest proceedings can be found in the staff report and in Government Code Section 57075. Staff has received several phone calls and emails from property owners within the district, within the proposed area. Those have all been in opposition. Reasons for opposition include the distance of fire facilities from the territory, the low number of dwellings and buildings within the territory. A significant number of calls are for traffic accidents, the additional costs and assessments to property owners. Additional agriculture operations have helped decrease wildfires and overall satisfaction with CAL FIRE providing services to the area. Pursuant to CEQA, the proposed annexation is considered exempt, and there is no possibility that the proposed annexation will have a significant effect on the environment. Staff's recommendation can be found on page 8 of the staff report, which includes approval of the proposed annexation as outlined in attached resolution number 2018-05. Approval of the application would certify the project as exempt from CEQA, approve the sphere of influence modification, and just for clarification purposes, because the sphere of influence modification is simultaneous with the annexation, staff is recommending that approval of the sphere of influence modification be contingent upon completion of the annexation. So if the annexation were to somewhere down the line, if it were to be approved and during the protest hearing it failed, the sphere of influence would also not go through. Approval also approves the annexation and directs the executive officer to initiate the protest proceedings. That concludes my presentation, and staff is available for questions.
Very good, thank you. Any questions of staff? Mr. Hahn.
I have some. The protest hearings you're talking about, is that different than the 218 protest hearings for the speding up the special district and the tax?
It is a different process, however, it serves in place of a Proposition 218. So
okay. So if it doesn't go through, yeah, I was wondering if you needed a second reason to do that since you're putting it in there. I get what you're saying. How much are they being annexed now to Stanislaus Consolidated Fire, and how much would it be if the protest hearing? What's the difference? You understand? They're going to put it they're going to do a 218 for a special tax for the Oakdale Fire District. That's going to be a certain amount of money, and what's currently being taken away from Stanislaus Consolidated because they're responsible for the area.
So Stanislaus Consolidated's current assessment would not change, and the existing Oakdale rural assessment would also not change. This would apply Oakdale's, I shouldn't call it an assessment, a special tax, over the existing amount over the new area. So the amounts themselves won't change, the methodology, the formula for the existing.
For the existing, but then there's approximately what's the additional tax going to be then?
So there will be no additional tax, right? Won't they just be subject to the existing tax if they are annexed in?
Right. And so they had an estimate in there. It's actually a total, right?
Well, if on page 55 of the staff report, it actually has a breakdown of how that special tax is implemented onto properties that are within the district now. So that's what would.
So that matrix there is that's the taxes in addition to what's being paid now. Okay, I didn't know whether it was replaced or what. Is that accurate? That this is
existing on the district now, so this would apply to the proposed annexation area as well. So whatever folks within the district are currently paying, the property owners within that proposed area, these are basically new folks to the district, they'll be paying the same
formula.
Same formula, yeah.
Which is this formula.
Right.
Which is more, it's more money.
Yeah, and they estimate that along with the tax sharing agreement with the county, that it will bring the district approximately $40,000 more a year.
Okay.
Very good. Any other questions of staff?
You said that
within the area, a lot of new almond orchards, a lot of new agriculture in the area. How many in the past year? What's the percentage, and maybe it was in here and I just missed it, the percentage of calls for fire versus calls for heart attacks and things like that? Is there a breakdown of that?
You showed that on that.
Yeah, if you turn, I don't know off the top of my head the percentages, but if you turn to page 34 of the staff report, there's a breakdown of the calls per year from 2014, 15, and 16.
Page 34, Bill, I think.
that takes in calls to Woodward Reservoir also, it says on here.
Correct, yes.
Yeah, it's got the breakdown by type, and the majority look like they're medical aid, and then the second would be vegetation fire, and then injury accident.
Okay. Just gonna wait and see. So it looks like the majority of their bill are EMS calls.
Yeah, a lot at Woodward probably, huh? It looks like.
I don't know if we've got that breakdown of how much is Woodward actually.
I don't think they had it separated for Woodward, but they do have, there's some water rescue calls and things that are likely attributable to Woodward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, only 2 residential structural fires. So in the report you said CAL FIRE doesn't respond to structure fires out there? Is that what I heard correct? Or did I not understand that right?
That's the information that they provided to us in the application, that CAL FIRE was responsible for the wildland fires and not necessarily medical. But the district might be able to clarify that as well.
Okay, any other questions of staff before we open it up to the public? Okay. Okay, well, we'll open this up to the public. Anybody who would like to approach and discuss this, questions they have? Come on up and state your name for the record. And
good evening. My name is Don Harper, and I'm a landowner on Highway 4 at the Orvis Ranch, 9601 East Highway 4. what I wanted to be able to bring to you guys was two perspectives. One is Oakdale Rural has not reached out to us. We had one meeting notification at the Valley Home Fire Station. One of our family members attended that, and it was not very well attended by the residents. And we left with more questions than we had answers. A couple of things of looking into this. Right now, Stanislaus Consolidated is contracted with Oakdale Rural. Oakdale Rural pays Stanislaus County, or Stanislaus Consolidated, $1.93 million a year for the coverage of the existing district. And that has resulted in Valley Home and Knights Ferry being half-staffed, so they're only open 3 days a week. We haven't had any recourse to be able to say, if we're assessed, are you going to open that house 24/7? And with where we are, we're 25 minutes response time from a manned firehouse in Valley Home. And being in the SRA, and being that our families and most of us out there are 5 or 6 generations, we're pretty much on our own, and we know that for the most part. And with a 25% response time, you're not saving anybody's life. And we know that. And there used to be mutual aid agreement with Farmington, which is 10 miles from us. We're almost 16 miles from Valley Home and 18 miles from Oakdale. The majority of what we see in our district up there are Highway 4 traffic accidents. And I see that Oakdale's out there every week, and they're usually significant, and there's quite a bit of a response. None of us have been in an accident for quite some time as residents of District 1 North. So these are people that are traveling through the county. I spoke with one of the district directors and asked about the ability for them to bill medical, which several districts already do that. They can bill insurance for medical calls, and even with accidents, they can bill for those things. So $40,000 to us, or to the district, out of $1.93 million, isn't going to pay for keeping a house open for 4 more days a week to provide us coverage, which is going to be inadequate anyway. And if Oakdale Rural comes out to fight a fire, if they don't show up, it doesn't matter because we're in the SRA, and CAL FIRE in Copperopolis covers that, both with fixed wing out of Columbia and ground forces from either Copperopolis, Jenny Lind, or Valley Springs. And we all have apparatus on our properties for our own protection. And as far as structure, CAL FIRE is going to respond to a wildland fire, which may endanger structures, so they'll be protected. Or if a structure starts it and it turns into a wildland fire, they're going to end up probably billing the homeowner for the cost of wildland fire. They'll have investigators come out. So at this point, I want to be recorded as opposing this because it has not been adequately addressed by the district. This has been something where we got a letter. We went to a firehouse meeting that was pretty short. There's no representation here to address what we have for questions, and we'd like to have this denied by this board and have it kicked back to them to say, we can answer some questions. And I do apologize for coming in late and having not been aware of this till we got the letter of notification for this. But mutual aid agreement with Copperopolis Fire and with Farmington is better served with where we are associated. We're in Stanislaus County. We have property in Calaveras County because we get split on that 45-degree property line. And we go to church in Farmington. Our post office is in San Joaquin County in Farmington. So we have connections, but we spend a lot of money in Oakdale. We shop here, and we spend our consumable money in Oakdale. So we're 35-minute response time for law enforcement, and we haven't had, other than the highway accidents, we're pretty much on our own, and we understand that. So with us paying $1,200 to $1,600 more in annual taxes, we oppose that. Thank you. Appreciate the time.
Thanks, Don. Anybody else? Thomas, how are you?
Pretty good, Chairman Withrow. Mr. Bearhill, Ms. Bublog, Mr. Van Winkle, Mr. Hahn, Tom Orvis. My family is Mr. Harper, who's a cousin of mine, has said we've been out there established since 1873, and we started probably in the 1850s putting it all together. I think to call it Division I North is a misnomer. The reality is it's affectionately referred to by Stanislaus, San Joaquin, Calaveras counties, no man's land. I see your map splits Woodward Reservoir. I find that kind of curious that a county facility itself would be split by fire protection provided by Stanislaus County. A lot of the grass fires, if you want to have an annual grass fire, a lot of that happens at Woodward Reservoir. I wonder why. You have problems there. You have a lot of people coming there from out of town. A lot of those people are coming from Stockton and those areas. As Don talked about, medical aid. If you're including Woodward Reservoir, there's a lot there. When we have an accident, many times Metaflight is overhead waiting for Oakdale and Oak Valley Community Hospital ambulance to get on the ground and assess if they've not already been assessed by Farmington or Copperopolis that's already beaten them there. As Don also said, when there's a grass fire, our first call usually is not. We can call 911, but a lot of times they'll get rerouted to CAL FIRE. And when we see the cavalry coming over the hill from Columbia, when we see the fixed-wing aircraft or the rotary aircraft, we know we stand a better chance. Oakdale quite often comes with water tender. Nothing against them. I grew up and went to school with many of those people, many of the volunteers that have been there and gone on to other fire departments. And their boards, great people. But when I had a conversation with one of the board members, and the board members of Oakdale Rural themselves are confused and not sure of how the policy or how the structure is going to go, I ask that you take a little thought about that. You know, maybe your best option might be a continuance until you find some more things out. I think, knowing the seats that you sit in, that is one of the quivers in your toolbox. Okay? So, have we been out there? Has this been for generations? It says 1997, I believe. Well, I've been alive out there for, yesterday I hit 51. And this is as old as the Oakdale bypass. Okay? And I think Supervisor Withrow, to explain it in terms that represent your district, this is like Modesto trying to take over Wood Colony. This is an area that's been there and taking care of itself for many years. And maybe there is somebody from Oakdale Rural from their board or representing the district that's out here. I would hope they would be. But if they're not, that tells me something too. So thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them. I will admit I do live in Oakdale and participate in Oakdale, but also work here in Modesto. But I think I got a little bit of history and a little bit of knowledge about the area. And as Donnie's eloquently said, we live in Stanislaus County, our phones are Calaveras County, and our mailing address is San Joaquin County. And until about 15 years ago, when we would call for aid on Copperopolis Road, they would send them to Farmington. They would send them to the Cook Ranch. And finally, the post office in Farmington, San Joaquin County, got the addresses on Highway 4 changed to East Highway 4. That almost took an act of Congress. So as you see, we're probably underrepresented. We've got there's a lot of acreage out there. And to answer your question, Mr. Berryhill, there has been a lot of permanent crops put in the area. But that brings up another thing that, you know, is for another commission, and it has to do with groundwater. But if you have any questions, I'd be glad to try and answer them.
Any questions of Tom?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Anyone else?
Good evening.
Hi.
My name is Vincent Victorine, and I'm on the board of Oakdale Rural. And I appreciate the comments. I haven't had the privilege of speaking to the gentleman, either one of them. But I was at the meeting that we had in Valley Home, and we have done everything that we've been guided as far as procedures to make the announcement and inform the residents of the area that we're discussing about annexing. So, I mean, we've done what we've been told to do to inform everyone. The question that I think, Mr. Hahn, you had, if the way I understood it was on how much more money the constituents or the residents of Division 1 North or No Man's Land would pay the additional. Well, there isn't any revenues generated from that area. So what we're asking is to apply the same tax measures on that area as the Valley Home constituents, as the Oakdale Rural constituents are currently assessed. Because they're giving, or they're participating in the same resources that the other two areas are participating with. So we're trying to do is just put everybody in the same arena. And the gentleman's right, it is a $1.9 million budget. The $40,000 is not going to be significant enough. That's not what it's about. It's, for me personally, it's so that I can look at the constituents that are paying in the eye and tell them that we're all in the same boat together. That we're not taking their resources that they're paying and directing them in an area that isn't paying. And I don't disagree with anything that's being said about the time, how long it takes to get there, because that changes. It changes. It depends on the weather. It depends on if we're staffing Valley Home versus Knights Ferry. I don't agree with the statement that we're only working 3 days a week. We're open for business every day of the week, but we have to choose. Are we going to be in Knights Ferry or are we going to be in Valley Home? But we have a station manned every day, and so we're open 7 days. So in my closing statement is that I would ask that you move towards allowing a protest vote so that we can have a memorialization of whether or not the folks from Division 1 North wants to be a part of our team or not. That's all. If they're, if they feel that they don't want to be annexed and be on that tax scroll, no problem. We're just going to cease providing services, however much we are providing or how little. We'll stop. So I would ask that you move forward with a protest vote so it can be memorialized. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Vince. Anyone else? Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board. Comments, concerns?
So I just have a couple thoughts. You, Vincent, I believe you said something in regard to not having spoken to any of these people. I don't know if you received the communications that we have here today, but I don't see a time sensitivity of not just continuing this so that the dialogue can take place, so that you kind of know where you're going as you progress. So I just feel as if just because you've done what was required and it didn't cover the people in this room, that means that maybe we should do just a little bit more, and it wouldn't cost you any more money if we just continue, and it might give you some goodwill with these people, and it might not.
Yeah,
Bill?
I would concur with that. I would think this would call for at least another meeting with the residents out there. Clearly, they haven't had a chance to air out all their concerns and maybe find some common ground. Maybe this just seems very inefficient to me, and I think that's what I was hearing from you guys. The response time from Oakdale is so much longer than it is from closer areas. So, maybe there's a way to work out an agreement with Farmington or whatever. But I think it just requires a little more discussion at that level before it comes back here, and I could support it.
Thanks, Bill. Any other comments? Okay, I'm just curious, the population in the proposed annexation area, what is the population there?
The estimate we have is 148 persons in the whole 54,000.
148 people? Okay, very good. And the last time this came before, the same proposal came before LAFCO in 1997, is that right? Any ideas as what, at that point, what killed it? I mean, did you guys have any?
No, I think we tried to find records on it, and all we could find were minutes that just said there were so many people who spoke. That's nothing as far as what they said, anything like that.
Okay. Okay. So I guess I would kind of share the concerns. I mean, we all want EMS. We want them to be there, and that's mainly what we need out there. I'm sure at this point, is most fire departments at this point, most of their calls, I'm sure, Vince, as you know, are EMS calls nowadays, and so what we're looking for is value here, right? It sounds like the residents want value for their costs, what they're going to, the additional costs, and I know the additional cost isn't a giant number that we're talking about here in proportion to the budget or in proportion to, but still, if this is going to happen, in my mind, I think it needs to be, some more work needs to be done. And there's no harm in sitting down with everybody and trying to work through, and maybe, Vince, it's so that you can sit down and get to a point where everybody can see, this is what I'm getting for this IC, based on the information you're giving me now, and you can get to that point where everybody finds value in this and wants to have this. But additional conversation wouldn't hurt one way or another. If we go ahead and move forward, protest votes are always hard to get. If you go forward and just say, well, if they really don't want this, let's let a protest vote. Those are tough to come by, and so I would say that's probably not the best approach to take. It's hard to get people to show up to vote anyway, let alone to protest. I mean, maybe it could, but I'd rather you guys make another run at this and try to find some common ground here, where maybe there is a determination that there's value for this or not, and then come back before us again, letting us know that, yeah, we've exhausted all avenues, we've had all our meetings and discussed everything, looked under every rock, and then at that point, bring it back to us, and then make that call at that point. Anyway, just my thoughts.
So I'd be willing to make a motion that we continue this till June 27th, if we're having a June meeting.
I'd probably recommend not making it date specific, just to give the district time.
Fair enough. Okay.
And then what we will do is we will renotice it out to the landowners, and of course to the folks that have given us correspondence. We'll let them know directly too that it's continued.
Okay, then I will fix that a little bit. I move that we continue this item.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion before we? And I might just add, 148 people. We could practically go to every single house. If they're not coming to you, you guys could go to them, and sit down, and maybe that's even better as compared to a crowd to individually sit with the landowners and talk to them and try to find some sort of common ground, like I said, value to this. So, okay, we have a motion and a second on all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, we'll hear back from you guys. Thank you all for your time tonight. Okay, we'll move on to item 7B, proposed LAFCO budget for fiscal year ended 18-19.
Okay. So we'll switch gears here. So as the Commission's aware, LAFCO is an independent agency established in each county, and state law establishes the specific funding methods and sources for our Commission in our budget each year. LAFCO is currently funded by the county in 9 cities, and tonight we'll be looking at the proposed budget for fiscal year 18-19. So during our preparation for the budget, staff has reviewed current and projected application activity, which is increasing, a review of all our expenses, including salaries and benefits, the county's cost allocation plan charges, and we also do a review of the available fund balance and then the designation of the Commission's reserve funds. So these are some of the highlights. Overall, there is a 9% increase this year. Not only do we have increases in the salaries and benefits category, but we've also included funding for the Commission's biennial audit. We have some costs in there for some IT improvements, and then also approval of the budget just overall would continue to support the municipal service work program as well as general LAFCO services. And this is at least the summary chart of it. All the individual accounts are attached to your packet on the last page. This shows the comparison between current year and the proposed. One thing we're noting, we're increasing the estimated revenues for application fees. We're actually running about triple what we had estimated for current year for revenues for applications, just showing that things are increasing, getting a little busier for us. One other thing to highlight here, though, too, is you'll notice the undesignated fund balance, that amount that we use to credit back to the county and the cities. That's been on the decline, so the agency contributions are going up. And we talked about this a little bit last year, too, kind of the trend of no longer using the fund balance to offset those contributions. So the agency contributions are actually going up and reflecting LAFCO's true operating budget. And there's kind of a forecast on there for the next 2 years, too. And this is what our fund balance has been looking like. That big drop that you see was when we credited back to the agencies about $430,000. So our fund balance was depleted quite a bit. You'll see there's kind of a little bump there when we actually got some good at application revenue, more than we expected. So our fund balance was looking pretty good. And then the future, though, we are still envisioning at least crediting back small amounts back to the agencies. At the same time, the Commission, right around when we credited back that $430,000, we also established reserves. So that's why, you know, we're depleting the fund balance, but we're also trying to be a little bit cautious about still keeping enough where reserves are still funded. So you'll see in future years we're getting pretty close to where we've got fund balance and reserves pretty much being the same thing. So this is the proposed reserve funds. The Commission adopted a policy that sets forth the general fund, which is the 15% of operating reserves, and the accrued leave fund, which is compensatable absences. That middle one, though, long-term liability, is something that we discussed at length last year. That it relates to the pension liability, that kind of intangible estimate of a number that fluctuates greatly throughout the years. And this just gives you an example of how it's fluctuated. The estimate that we had last year, which is actually in regards to the prior year's results, was only $168,700. And then this year, the estimate that we got is over 500,000, and that reflects the rate of return that was anticipated to be a lot higher than it actually was. One thing that the auditor's office has told us, though, is that the more recent rate of return has recovered and been a lot better. So the number that we will see as next year's estimate will probably be a lot lower, more like that 168,000 that you see. So we're trying to be a little bit cautious about setting aside too much reserve for that category. If we can't really pin down exactly what that number is going to be, and we know that that number is really just an overall estimate of the health of the entire system and not necessarily reflective of us as individual employees and what we're truly going to cost, we want to make sure that we're not setting aside too much for it, but at the same time the Commission did want to be a little bit cautious and set aside some funds. So as I said before, this will help to fund our current work program and also our application activity. In the current fiscal year, we had already completed the 2017 work program. We're already starting on the 2018 work program. Our increase in application activity that I spoke of, I had an estimate in there of applications that we may receive in the coming year. I think we may even exceed that. But we are getting a lot of inquiries about city annexations, as well as district annexations and various changes. So this is the proposed reserve funds. The Commission adopted a policy that sets forth the general fund, which is the 15% of operating reserves, and the accrued leave fund, which is compensatable absences. So the middle one, though, long-term liability, is something that we had So the next steps for the budget itself, we do have some deadlines that we have to meet. The proposed budget itself needs to be adopted by May 1st. Final budget, which will be at our next meeting, needs to be adopted by June 15th. And then following adoption, the auditor apportions out the allocation to all the agencies. So with that, the staff recommends that we, of course, open the public hearing and that the commission adopt Resolution 2018-06. And then we schedule the public hearing for the final budget for our next meeting, May 23rd. And staff is available if you have any questions.
Very good, thank you. Any questions of staff?
I have one. You did mention there was going to be did I hear you correctly, an increase to the cities and the supporting agencies? Is it, what percentage is that, do you think?
So our overall budget increase is 9%. So some of the cities may see an increase around that mark, but it is going to be dependent on how they did in terms of their revenues, because it's apportioned out based on their revenues. So I'll bring a pie chart at the next meeting, but you'll end up seeing that Modesto generally accounts for about 30% of that. And then, as an example, Houston, they're less than 1%, and that difference for them is $500. So it varies pretty greatly, but it can also fluctuate just based on a city's own revenues.
Very good. Any other questions? Sarah, the only thing I'd ask is if we could, and we can't do this right now, but once the year closes, our June 30 year end, is get actual numbers for a meeting. We always have our proposed budget and estimated. If we could have the actuals in comparison when the year does close and see how we ended up in comparison to the budgeted. And just another column added on the sheet to show the actual numbers and where we were and where we hit and where we missed.
You can see where my estimates landed.
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be good.
That would be great. And then that affects the amount that carries over into the fund balance too, and we really can't see that anywhere without really seeing the actual numbers and seeing how close we were. So that sounds good. Okay. No other questions? We'll open a public hearing. Anyone from the public wish to discuss the budget? Okay. There's probably a lot of people at home right now that are watching and have a lot of questions. When the accounting stuff comes in, everybody starts to pay attention.
It's just you.
Okay. All right. Bringing it back to the board. Do we have a motion to approve the budget?
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to accept all staff recommendations. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Very good. Okay. Commissioner comments? No comments. Additional matters at the discretion of chairperson? None. Executive officers report.
Okay. So for our next meeting, May 23rd, we will have the commission's final budget. We also have a proposal from the city of Oakdale for a water extension to the Tioga Avenue area. We should have a municipal service review update for Salida Sanitary District as well at that meeting. And then we will work with the Oakdale Rural Fire Protection District to see when they can schedule another meeting for outreach, and then we'll hopefully have something scheduled shortly after that, possibly June, but we'll see if they can get something.
Okay, very good. See no other
Move to adjourn.
motion to adjourn. Second? Second? All in favor?
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned.